The reason that these two chapters, Perek Dalet and Perek Hey in Sefer Shoftim, the 4th and 5th chapter in the book of Judges, are so interesting is because, as we learned in the past few weeks, from the beginning of the book of Judges, Am Yisrael, they don't have a leader that is taking them on a straight path. We mentioned this in the past that when Am Yisrael had Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader of the leaders, and he passed off the leadership when he was about to pass away to Yehoshua bin Nun. And he was also a great leader. But when Yehoshua died, as we started the book of Judges, that at the time of the Zkenim, not more than a few days, it says there, just a few days where they didn't have a correct and a proper leader for Am Yisrael. And we saw in the past few weeks that it became a very, very big horror. Am Yisrael is not in a straight path. From time to time, they go and worship different idols. And maybe sometimes they also worship and also think of Hashem. And then it turns to a point where they forget from Hashem completely. And they're only with worshiping idols until there's something that wakes them up. They're in this big horror. They become slaves to different nations. And then some kind of leader, a prophet, comes and takes Am Yisrael into their hands, starts a war with the enemy of in those days, and then they come back to Hashem. And after that leader dies, it could be 8 years, it could be 40 years, again, Am Yisrael does a sin, they go and worship different idols, they go to different enemies, different nations, and then again comes a new leader. And over here, last chapter we learned about Ehud ben Gera, which was their latest leader. And in this chapter, Perek Dalet, the 4th chapter, it says, "Vayosifu bnei Yisrael la'asot hara bnei Adonai ve'Ehud met." Am Yisrael is continuing to do bad things in front of Hashem. And their last leader, Ehud ben Gera, dies. And we're going to see in the psukim, like we did in last few times, that what's going to happen to Am Yisrael, who's going to take the next leadership, and maybe a surprising leadership, which we didn't see until now so much in the past. We did see these kind of leaders, but not like how we see it this time. And maybe that could also teach us something from the future then and also for now. So like we did last time, we're going to show the psukim on the screen. Okay. So as you see here, Perek Dalet starts like we read beforehand, "Vayosifu bnei Yisrael la'asot hara bnei Adonai ve'Ehud met." Their last leader, Ehud ben Gera, dies, and as we saw already several times, Am Yisrael gets a twist, and they go to other nations. They go to worship. They go to be slaves. They go to live with other nations. They get married with other nations. They're all mixed up with other nations, and that the only thing that could come out of that is horror, bad things. Vayimkerem, and here in Pasuk Bet, we already see that they are sold. Vayimkerem Adonai be'ad Yavin melech Knaan asher malach bechatzor v'sar tzva'o Sisra vehu yoshev b'charoshet hagoyim. ויצעקו בני ישראל אל אדוני, כי 900 רכב ברזל לו, והוא לחץ את בני ישראל בחוזקם 20 שנה. Am Yisrael is sold to the king, Yavin, the king of the nation of Canaan, which was the king in Chatzor, and his commander, the commander of the army of the nation of Canaan, is called Sisra. And we're going to see this very interesting chapter, a very nice story, how Am Yisrael is going to war against this nation, against this army, and how Sisra is captured, and this amazing, surprising way how he is captured and is killed. And Am Yisrael again is calling up to Hashem because, again, we're going, as we said in the previous times, that this is going over and over. They are having a bad situation. They are having a bad time. And a Jewish person is never disconnected from Hashem. And when he needs something, it's not only when he needs something he should call up to Hashem, but usually, or maybe a lot of the times when a person, a Jewish person really needs something, then he remembers that he is always connected to Hashem. And that's what Am Yisrael does. In Pasuk Gimel, the third Pasuk, Am Yisrael cries up to Hashem because this army, this nation Canaan, and Sisra, the commander of the Canaan army, they have 900 Rechev Barzel, iron vehicles, and they want to go and crush Am Yisrael. And they are doing this for already 20 years. And here comes the next leader, the prophet Dvorah. Dvorah isha nevi'ah, eshet lapidot, היא שופטה את ישראל בעת ההיא. And this Dvorah, as you see, eshet lapidot, why is she called eshet lapidot? Lapidot, a lapid is kind of a torch. So why is she called the woman of torch? Rashi explains that she would make the wicks for Bet HaMikdash. She would twist around the wicks that they would be putting in the menorah. One of the actions of the Kohanim in Bet HaMikdash was to light the menorah every single day. And Rashi explains that she was called Eshet Lapidot, the woman of torches, that she would be making the wicks for the menorah in Bet HaMikdash. והיא יושבת תחת תומר דבורה בן הרמה ובן בית אל בהר אפרים, ויעלו אליה בני ישראל למשפט. ותשלח ותקרא לברק בן אבינועם מקדש נפתלי, ותאמר אליו הלא ציווה אדוני אלוהי ישראל, לך ומשכת בהר תבור, ולקחת עמך 10,000 איש מבני ישראל נפתלי ומבני זבולון. דבורה אישה נביאה, the prophet, Am Yisrael is coming up to her to judge, for judgment, to see what can we do? How can we get this horror nation of Canaan, this big army, this huge army, off of our backs? And Dvorah judges Am Yisrael, and in the mountain of Ephraim, which, by the way, also, if you remember, Yehoshua bin Nun, he also came from Shevet Ephraim, and she calls up to another person, another leader, Barak ben Avinoam, from the place of Naphtali. If you remember, we showed the map several times when we were learning Sefer Yoshua. Naphtali is all the way up north in the land of Israel. And she tells Naphtali, Halo tziva Adonai Elohei Yisrael. Hashem commanded us. What did Hashem command? What is she telling him that Hashem commanded? And the answer is that Hashem commanded that there are nations that we need to erase, we need to vanish them from this world. And one of the nations is the nation of Canaan. So now she's ordering Barak ben Avinoam, who she's going to be a leader with, and go collect an army and get ready to battle against this nation. Because one of the commandments of Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu in the Torah is to go to war. 7 nations that are in Eretz Israel, you need to go, because Eretz Israel is only for Am Yisrael, is only and only and only for the Jewish people, and no other nation should be sitting in the land of Israel. It's the Holy Land, and as long as there are other nations in one of these 7 nations, Hashem commanded Moshe that these nations need to disappear. And in Pasuk Zayin, she continues, ומשכתי אליך אל נחל קישון את סיסרא, שר צבא יבין, ואת רכבו ואת המונו ונתתיהו בידיך. She tells him that they're going to do some kind of battle. She's going to pull Sisra. Sisra, if you remember, he's the commander of the army of the nation of Canaan. ויאמר, פסוק 8, ויאמר אליה ברק, אם תלכי עמי והלכתי, ואם לא תלכי עמי, לא אלך. He gives her a choice. If you are going to come with me, let's go. But I am not going to go alone. He does not trust himself. He needs the blessing of Dvorah Isha Neviah. He needs the blessing of this prophet, of this leadership for the nation at this time, which was a woman, which was Dvorah. And what does she say? Vatomer haloch elech imach, efes ki lo tiyeh tifartecha al haderech asher ata holech, ki biyad isha imkor Adonai et Sisra, vatakom Dvorah vatelech im Barak, and what does Dvorah answer? I'm going to go with you. And Sisra is going to be surprised because she's a prophet, she knows maybe what's going to be in the future. And what's going to be in the future, Sisra is going to be very surprised how he is going to be captured, how his army is going to, instead of coming and to war, they will just turn around and start running away. And in Pasuk Yud, ויזעק ברק את זבולון ואת נפתלי קדשה, ויעל ברגליו 10,000 איש, ותעל עמו דבורה. Barak ben Avinoam, he calls up the tribe of Zvulun, the tribe of Naphtali, which both of them were sitting next to each other in the state of Israel, in the land of Israel, and they collect the army, 10,000 people in their army, and also Dvorah goes with them. וחבר הקני נפרד מקין מבני חובב חותן משה, ויט אוהלו עד אלון בצעננים אשר את קדש. ויגידו לסיסרא כי עלה ברק בן אבינועם הר תבור. And they get ready for this battle, and Sisra, the commander of Canaan, is notified that Barak ben Avinoam and Dvorah and their 10,000 people army, soldiers in the army, are ready to go and battle. And when the enemy, or when any army hears that their enemy is coming to battle, they need to get ready. And here in Pasuk Yud Gimel, Pasuk 13, ויזעק סיסרא את כל רכבו, 900 רכב ברזל, ואת כל העם אשר איתו מחרושת הגויים אל נחל קישון. He gets ready for the army, for the war. ותאמר דבורה אל ברק, פסוק 14, קום, כי זה היום אשר נתן אדוני את סיסרא בידיך, הלא אדוני יצא לפניך, וירד ברק מהר תבור ו10,000 איש אחריו. ויהום אדוני את סיסרא ואת כל הרכב ואת כל המחנה לפי חרב ולפני ברק, וירד סיסרא מעל המרכבה וינוס ברגליו. Dvorah comes to Barak and tells him, this is your day to win. This is your day of blessing. Now it's time to go to war. Barak ben Avinoam takes the 10,000 soldiers and goes to war against this big army of Canaan with the commander of Sisra, which he was a hero, by the way. Sisra wasn't just some kind of regular person that they found on the road and put him as a commander. He was a hero. He won a lot of wars in the past. He has a very, very past and a great soldier, and he's a hero. And Dvorah comes to Barak, and Am Yisrael is a little afraid because this is a big army. But when Dvorah comes to Barak and she tells him, this is your day. This is the day of luck. Today you are going to win this battle. Then it's time for you to stand up and go to war. And as we read, Vayahom, what is the word in Pasuk 15? Vayahom, Sisra got up. He saw this big noise coming, and he also got ready. But Hashem came to Sisra and to the army of Canaan, and he did that they'll have some kind of fear. And instead of going to war against Am Yisrael, which they thought they were heroes than them, what did they do? They just turned around and started running away. And also Sisra, the big hero, he saw that he has no chance. He gets off his horse. Then Vayanos bereglav, and he starts running away with his feet. וברק רדף אחרי הרכב ואחרי המחנה עד חרושת הגויים, ויפול כל מחנה סיסרא לפי חרב, לא נשאר עד אחד. וסיסרא נס ברגליו, פסוק 17, אל אוהל יעל אשת חבר הקני, כי שלום בין יבין מלך חצור ובין בית חבר הקני. So what happened to all the army of Sisra? Everybody died. Am Yisrael captured their army, and everybody was killed in that war, except for their commander. The commander was so afraid, he just left their army alone, and he started running by foot. Where did he run to? He ran to the tent of Yael. Yael eshet chever hakeni, because there was peace between Yavin, the king of Melech Hatzor, uven bet chever hakeni. Because there was peace between the nation of Sisra and chever hakeni, this other nation, then they thought, okay, maybe they'll help us. Maybe they'll help me. Sisra is thinking for himself, and that's why he runs. He gets to their tents. He gets to their campsite, and he goes into the tent of this woman, Yael. ותצא יעל לקראת סיסרא, פסוק 18, ותאמר אליו, סורה אדוני, סורה אליי, אל תירא. ויסר אליה האוהלה ותכסהו בשמיכה. She comes, she greets Sisra, she says, don't have fear, come into my tent, I will make sure you're okay. He goes into her tent, she covers him with a blanket so no one will see, and then he tells her the whole story. ויאמר אליה, השקיני נא מעט מים כי צמאתי, ותפתח את נוד החלב, ותשקהו ותכסהו. He asks for water. He's been running now for who knows how long, for maybe days, maybe hours. He's been running, so he asks for water. But Yael, she does something brilliant. She doesn't give him water. She gives him milk. And he drinks this milk and he lies down. Vayomer Eleha, Sisra speaks to Yael and he tells her, Amod petach ha'ohel, v'aya im ish yavo ushelech v'amar hayesh po ish v'amart ayin. He tells her, make sure no one comes and asks. And if someone comes and asks if someone's here, just answer no one's here. Very simple. No one is here. But Sisra does not know that Yael had a plan. Before, we just read the pasuk regular. Sisra asked for water. Yael gave him milk. What's the big difference? Water, milk. There's a very, very big difference. And also it has to do with Chanukah that's coming up. Drinking milk makes the person tired. Drinking water could give him strength or it's good for the body, but eating milk products or drinking milk, that makes the person tired. And because she gave him milk, she had a plan. He's gonna go lie down, fall asleep because he was in war, he's very tired, let's make him even more tired, and he will go and lie down. And while he lies down, Pasuk 21, ותיקח יעל אשת חבר את יתד האוהל, ותשם את המקבת בידה, ותבוא אליו בלט, ותתקע את היתד ברקתו, ותצנח בארץ, והוא נרדם, ויעוף וימות. She comes, has a plan, she takes the tent pin, and she stabs Sisra while he is sleeping, because even though he thought that maybe they had peace with their nation, but this Yael, Eshet Chever HaKeni, she became righteous because she captured the enemy, she captured the hero and the commander of the big army that Am Yisrael were tortured, were slaves for so many years, for 20 years, like we saw before, and she is the one that captured him with a brilliant idea of giving him milk instead of water. והנה ברק רודף את סיסרא, and we're going back to Barak ben Avinoam, which is looking for Sisra, ותצא יעל לקראתו, ותאמר לו, לך והראך את האיש אשר אתה מבקש. ויבוא אליה, והנה סיסרא נופל מת, והיתד ברקתו. Barak ben Avinoam comes running, looks for the person that he's looking for, which is Sisra, and Yael tells him, come, I'll show you where he is, and he shows her that he was captured and killed. ויחנה אלוהים ביום ההוא את יבין מלך כנען לפני בני ישראל, ותלך יד בני ישראל הלוך וקשה על יבין מלך כנען, עד אשר הכריתו את יבין מלך כנען. After they saw that Sisra was killed, their commander was killed, then they started going towards the king of Canaan, which had control over Am Yisrael for the past 20 years, and they went with hard and a strong hand against Yavin, the king of Canaan, until they got to him, until they captured him, and they caught him and put him down like they were supposed to. And that is the story between Dvorah, Isha Neviah, and Barak ben Avinoam, the two leaders at this time after Ehud ben Gera, when they went to war against the hero Sisra, the big commander of the big army of the king of Canaan. Now, if we go back, before we continue to the next chapter, just if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask or to write on the chat. If you remember, in Sefer Shmot, in the second book of the Torah, after Am Yisrael went out of Egypt and they got to the Red Sea. And the Red Sea, Hashem made a great miracle, and the Red Sea was opened, and Am Israel walked in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the Red Sea, and sang a song, like we say every single day in davening in the morning. אז ישיר משה ובני ישראל את השירה הזאת לאדוני ויאמרו לאמור, אשירה לאדוני כי גאו גאה סוס ורוכבו רמה וים. From the Torah, we say it every single day in the morning, and Am Israel is greeting Hashem, is singing to Hashem. What a wonderful miracle. Thank you for all the miracles that you have been doing for us. And you can look in the psukim there, wonderful words. And because Am Israel sang to Hashem from this big miracle, we have here in the next chapter another song, which is called Shirat Dvorah. That, by the way, when do we read Shirat Dvorah in Shul? So we don't read it in Kriyat Torah because it's not part of the 5 books that we have in the scroll of the Torah. But as we all know, on Shabbat, we have another portion that we read after we lane, which is called Haftarah. And every single week's Haftarah has to do with the portion of the parsha that we read. Could be with the story if this week has to do with Yaakov and Esav. Also, the Haftarah was with Yaakov and Esav. The Haftarah of Parashat Beshalach, the Haftarah of when we lane the Az Yashir Moshe, the song that Moshe and Am Yisrael sang when they crossed the Red Sea, the Haftarah is Shirat Dvorah. Because in the Torah we have of Yam Suf, Shirat Hayam. In the Haftarah, we bring another song that was sang, which is Shirat Dvorah. We're going to start learning the Shirat Dvorah. If we look at the words, it's not the most simple chapter to learn. There are a lot of different explanations. We're going to go through the explanation of Rashi. Rashi, one of the most famous explanations on the whole Bible, on the whole Talmud, on a lot of different writings that were written in the Jewish world. And we're going to explain this song that Dvorah Neviah sang after she saw this big miracle that Am Yisrael went through and the capture of Sisra. And we'll see with the time how far we get through the chapter, and we'll see if we'll finish it or stop in the middle. So already here on the first pasuk of the 5th chapter, we see a song, Vatashar, from the word shira, from the word singing. Dvorah and Barak ben Avinoam, they come and sing that day that they captured Sisra, and after they captured the king of Canaan, Yavin. ותשר דבורה וברק בן אבינעם ביום ההוא לאמור. בפרוע הפרעות בישראל, בהתנדב עם ברכו אדוני. שמעו מלכים, האזינו רוזנים, אנוכי לאדוני, אנוכי אשירה אזמר לאדוני אלוהי ישראל. We'll read one more pasuk and then explain. אדוני בצאתך משעיר בצעדך משדה אדום, ארץ רעשה גם שמיים נטפו, גם אבים נטפו מים. In this song, we have a splitting. We can split this chapter to a few different types of psukim. The first 3 is the title, the song, and then we have a few psukim of the first part, which that Hashem is woken up by Am Yisrael at their times when they were slaves, when they were being tortured by this nation of Canaan. And if we look at pasuk bet, the second pasuk, before praot beYisrael, beitnadev am baruchu Hashem. When the horror comes upon Am Yisrael that their enemy are doing to them, and why is that? Because they left Hashem, like we've seen in the past chapters. But then, like we always think about this on the month of Elul, when Rosh Hashanah comes close, when Yom Kippur, is to do tshuva, to return to Hashem. The truth is that we need to do tshuva every single day. So, right, we are close to Hashem, right? We learn Torah, we come to daven, but every single person always needs to do tshuva. And over here, Am Yisrael, only after they got their horror, only after they are tortured, then they do tshuva. That, by the way, it says that every single person needs to do tshuva a day before he dies. Now you'll ask yourself, how do I know when I'm going to die? How do I know? That's the answer. Every single day we need to do tshuva, because maybe tomorrow will be our last day. We don't know. And because we need to do tshuva every single day before we die, then every single day needs to be part of tshuva. And tshuva isn't just of sins, but it's getting closer to Hashem and getting on a higher level closer to Hashem. So over here, before Pra'ot B'Yisrael, when Am Yisrael had these horrors, why? Because they left Hashem. They came and asked back for Hashem, please take us back to you. Give us a leader that will lead us in the next few years, or not thinking of few years, but for a lifetime. And in Pasuk Gimel, the third Pasuk, Shim'u melachim, ha'azinu roznim, anochi la'Hashem, anochi ashira azamer la'Hashem Elohei Yisrael. The word anochi here, which means myself, is mentioned twice. Anochi la'Hashem, anochi ashira. If we go back to the mountain of Sinai, we see over there that says the first words of the 10 commandments, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. And also in the mountain of Tavor, where Barak ben Avinoam came from, he says, Anochi, Anochi. And just like over there, he said it twice. And in Har Sinai, when Am Yisrael received the Torah, it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. We see that this war that is coming, and also with Eliyahu on the mountain of Carmel, where he says, Anochi, then we see that this war is something holy. Just like receiving the Torah started with the word Anochi, and also over here, Dvorah sings, Anochi la'Hashem, Anochi ashira, I am to Hashem, I am, will sing the song in order to praise to Hashem and thank Him. Hashem betzadcha meseir, betzadcha misde Edom, eretz ra'asha, gam shamayim natafu, gam avim natfu mayim. Also here we have a lot of words that have to do with receiving the Torah on Har Sinai. It says here, Hashem betzedcha meseir, where Hashem left Seir, the place, betzadcha misde Edom. Rashi says that this is Matan Torah. This is the time that Am Yisrael received the Torah, like it says in Sefer Dvarim, v'zarach meseir lamo hofia mehar paran. And when is that? That is, when did Hashem come and show himself, not just in front of Moshe Rabbeinu, which was a prophet, not just in front of Yehoshua or other prophets that we had in the history, but in front of all of Am Yisrael, like they are in Har Sinai, on Sinai mountain, at the time when they received the Torah. And how does that have to do here? How does the receiving the Torah have to do with the Devorah and this war? That just like over there, it was with strength, with gvura, there were thunders, there was lightning, there was the sound of the shofar. So over here, the pasuk says, Eretz ra'asha, gam shamayim natfu, gam avim natfu mayim. Also here, the land was noisy, the sky was raining, there were, in Har Sinai, there were thunders and lightning. Also over here, Hashem was with us, maybe not in the sounds like we had right when we received the Torah, but definitely with the blessing of Hashem and the noise, the silent noise. Maybe it sounds weird, the silent noise, but the silent noise of the blessing of Hashem in this war. Harim nazlu mipnei Hashem ze Sinai, mipnei Hashem Elohei Yisrael. So here the pasuk, especially Dvorah and Barak say in front of us, this is Sinai. This is just like on Har Sinai in Pasuk 5. בימי שמגר בן ענת, בימי יעל חדלו אורחות והולכי נתיבות ילכו אורחות הכלכלות. Over here, Dvorah gives us a few names of women. At the time of Shamgar ben Anat and Yael, Eshet Chaver Keni, when they judged Am Yisrael in their days, then Am Yisrael had fear to go to their enemy. And they were going on the sideway, they were going to hide. They didn't have enough strength, enough power to go in front of their enemy, to confront their enemy, just like they did at the time of Barak and Dvorah. Chadlu frazon ve'Yisrael chadelu, Pasuk 7, Ad shakamti Dvorah, shakamti em be'Yisrael. Am Yisrael was afraid in those times. Am Yisrael had times where they were afraid to go to war. And they were going, if they needed to get somewhere, they didn't want to pass. We'll see, and later on in the chapter, they didn't want to pass in the river because maybe they'll make noise with their feet on the stones and the enemy will hear them. They would go around. But when Dvorah comes and Barak ben Avinoam, they lead this nation into this war, Am Yisrael is not afraid at this time. יבחר אלוהים חדשים אז לחם שערים, מגן מרעה ורומח ב40,000 בישראל. When Am Yisrael chose to worship a different idol and left Hashem, then they needed to battle against their enemy. And that's why they were afraid, because they weren't close to Hashem. But when they were close to Hashem, when they were in the gates of Hashem, b'she'arecha, and they were close to Hashem and returning to Hashem, then that is the time, like we have in Sefer Dvarim, ki imatzeh bekirbecha be'achad she'arecha. Over there it says that when you see someone in the nation that is worshiping a different idol, you need to be careful from him. And especially when you have all the nation, all of a generation worshiping idols or connecting and have intermarriage with a different nation, we need to look at something. Of course, Am Yisrael will be afraid. There's no question. Hashem is not helping them. Why should Hashem help them if they're just turning their back to Hashem? Pasuk 9, ליבי לחוקקי ישראל המתנדבים בעם ברכו אדוני. Dvorah says, my heart is to love the sages of Am Yisrael, which are blessing Hashem and returning to Hashem. Baruchu Hashem, just like you can hear, like we say in the Torah, Baruchu et Hashem mevorach, when they are blessing Hashem, and Dvorah is connecting to these people. Rochvei atonot zchorot, yoshvei al midin, veholchei al derech sichu. We're in Pasuk 10. And this pasuk, when she says, Dvorah says, when we see these donkeys or the people that are riding on these donkeys, yoshvei al midin, which are going for judgment from the word din, from the word judgment, ve'olchei al derech sichu, that they are going and telling Hashem in all the good things that are happening to Hashem. מכל מחצצים, פסוק 11, בין משאבים, שם יתנו צדקות אדוני, צדקות פרזונו בישראל, אז ירדו לשערים עם אדוני. Also here we have again the word she'arim, like we had beforehand, the gates, כי ימצא בקרבך באחד שעריך, and the word מחצצים is like we said beforehand, the second word in the Pasuk 11, we have mikol mechatzitzim, the sound of the archers. Another explanation that is brought down is from the word chatzatz. Chatzatz are very, very small rocks, a lot of small rocks together. When you step on them, then they make a lot of noise. And Am Yisrael, Dvorah sings here that when Am Yisrael weren't close to Hashem, when they were worshiping different idols, like we said before, and they were afraid to make any noise next to the enemy because they were afraid from them. They were afraid to go on these small stones, these chatzats that were all over, in order not to wake up the enemy, in order that the enemy won't hear them and they will be captured. Uri Uri Dvorah, Uri Uri Dabri Shir, Kum Barak Ushva Shevyecha Ben Avinoam. Dvorah wakes up, or Hashem tells Dvorah to wake up. Dvorah wakes up Barak ben Avinoam from the word Uri Uri, and to have power, to have strength, to go and to start to battle against this enemy. אז ירד שריד לאדירים, in Pasuk 13, עם אדוני ורד לי בגיבורים. Also the powerful people that were in Am Yisrael, they didn't have any strength anymore. Az yarad sarid la'adirim, the great people. Hashem yarad li bagiburim. So in that case, Hashem called upon me in order to wake up the heroes in Am Yisrael, in order to give them strength. Because even though the heroes, but sometimes the heroship inside them is asleep, that's why Hashem called upon me. She's saying about herself, Dvorah, to come and wake up the powerful people, to wake up Barak ben Avinoam, to wake up the 100,000 soldiers that are ready to go to war. This is the first part of the song, which we said that can be split in a few parts, in 3 parts. And we saw in this part that Dvorah is explaining the situation that Am Yisrael is in, explaining the situation where they were worshiping different idols, they were connecting to the nation of Canaan, and then they started being tortured, being slaves, and then they started connecting to Hashem. But as long as they weren't with Hashem, as long as they didn't receive the blessing of Hashem with a commander, with a leader, then they were still afraid, as we saw in a few psukim, afraid even to walk on rocks, or afraid to wake up the enemy. And until we saw 2 psukim ago in pasuk 12, Uri Uri Dvorah, wake up Dvorah, the prophet, wake up Barak ben Avinoam, go capture the enemy. And that is the first part of this song of Dvorah, Shirat Dvorah. We're going to end here the shiur, and Bezrat Hashem next week we'll go over the first part just for a few minutes, because it is a little complicated words. It is a little different meanings and explanations that we can explain here, and then continue until the end of the chapter, a little long chapter, which with the continuation of the song, and we're going to see how beautiful Dvorah explains all the miracles that went on in this war, in this battle against Canaan, against Sisera itself, how she explains all the story with Yael in the tent and the killing Sisera. And Bezrat Hashem next week we'll go over the first part, continue until the end of the chapter, and continue from there, Bezrat Hashem. If anybody has any questions, please feel free. If not, have a great week.